On this episode of Tips on the Top Floor, I will give you some advice on buying a camera. We'll look into the specific problems of working with clients who don't know anything about image composition, and let's look at concert photography. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the easiest way to create a beautiful website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and incredible 24/7 customer support. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter offer code TOPFLOOR at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace, build it beautiful. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 674 for Thursday, March the 13th, 2015.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, all right, from the top floor.
Hey Chris, moin. My name is Kirsten. Love your show. I have a question regarding, kind of related to the last show when it comes to manual exposure. How would you, what settings would you use, let's say, in situations where the light is never constant, like nightclubs, parties, where basically the only light you have is that what comes from the DJ. So obviously exposure always changes. Would you use manual as well? And let's say the onboard flash. I shoot Nikon, by the way. So if you use an SB900, put that also into manual, or use it in a TTL mode. Or what settings would you use in general to shoot these situations? Appreciate your comment on that. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the question. Good event in concert photography, I think, is not just a matter of the camera settings, it's also a matter of post-processing. Actually, even more important, I think the two have to go hand in hand. It can't just be the settings or the post-processing. And do not expect to be able to do concert photography and not have to post-process. It's just the dynamic range is so amazingly big in these situations that let's say it at least helps and it gives you a bit more control. What I don't use is flash in that context, because flash has a daylight color, 5,500 Kelvin, and it will often clash with the lights on stage and kind of make it look fake. So I would rather lose part of a picture to into blackness. I'd rather underexpose parts of the picture than because that often adds great mood and realism rather than having everything visible in a picture. Just say goodbye to the notion that you will have to see everything in a picture. That's just not the case in event photography, especially in concerts on stage. What I always try to avoid is overexposing individual color channels. That is really something that often looks weird and horrible. Like, let's say, and then this is a very typical thing, the red color channel being overexposed. You end up with flat splotches of color, of just plain red, no detail, no structure, no texture in some parts of the picture. And that does just, in my eyes, not look nice. So again, as I said, huge big dynamic range you're fighting. So the camera will just not be able to get all this in one shot. And that's okay, because underexposure is better than overexposure most of the time in these cases. And of course, if you shoot directly into the lights, yes, there will be overexposure. It's always overexposed directly into the lights, but that's okay. That's okay too. But underexposure, areas that completely dive into the black, yep, that's just what a stage looks like, right? So from a camera side, from a camera point of view, it's manual settings all the way for me. And yes, sometimes you can bring up some of the shadows in post, which will introduce a bit of noise, but again, underexposure is okay. So the shadows can be black, that's fine. I will typically choose settings that will allow me to recover the lights in post-processing, because there will be some overexposure. That's impossible to avoid. And The exposure, you said that the exposure changes all the time. Yes and no. I mean, yes, if you shoot on any sort of an automatic mode, you will let your camera determine the exposure, and it'll do that every time you shoot, and you will end up with pictures that are too bright, because if you shoot at the moment when the lights are off, it'll just crank it up, and they will be too dark if the lights are full on, because the exposure, because the camera will think it's too bright, and then it'll take everything down a notch, and that will end up getting your exposure all over the place, and that is really, really horrible. So I guess it's manual, but the exposure, I think we're talking about a range there, and the range is between the brightest and the darkest that any scene has to offer in a concert. And I'm talking about scenes because sometimes those are actually scenes from a lighting point of view. The light person who runs the light show in some of those events has that planned out as scenes, and those are by a song or by part of a song, and but we'll talk about this in a minute. So I will fix the manual exposure somewhere in the middle, and that is always based on my knowledge of what I can still recover in post-processing. That's kind of the secret here. So I will typically shoot at a specific exposure, and that is depending on the song, and different songs will have different light moods probably. It helps to learn to read the histogram, so you can actually determine if you got a good exposure or not, and it might take you a few test shots in the beginning to get it right. If you go just by the brightness of your display, forget about it, because that will lie to you left and right. If you look at the display in a dark environment, it will look too bright. And if you look at your display outside in the sun, it will look too dark. So it's the environment that will fool you. And the best way is to learn to read the histogram, and then you will be able to determine, no matter what brightness your camera display is set to, you will be able to learn to determine if you get the exposure right or if you don't. Manual white balance. Again, this is a manual setting for me, around 3600 Kelvin. And that is just a gut feel thing. And I'm shooting RAW, so I can change that afterwards. Not a big deal. But I like to have it fixed, because otherwise the camera will try to determine it. And with all those colorful lights on stage, the camera will be, again, moving your white balance around like crazy. And I want some consistency when I import the pictures into Lightroom and then look at them. I want some consistency there. So fixed manual white balance, again, 3600 Kelvin, good starting point, and then move them up or down from there, but that's a good starting point. And again, I shoot RAW. And RAW means you can, by the magic of RAW processing, you can recover some of those color channels later on. So if you have a burnt out red color channel, let's say the typical thing, volume light, which means they have like some smoke on stage and then a red beam of light shining through that smoke, and then the closer you get to the light fixture, the brighter it will get, and you will end up with overexposed parts there. It's just the way it works. And if you learn how to recover individual color channels, that's kind of one of the things in post-processing that you need to learn to do. And it used to be mainly the red channel, but now it kind of ends up being, with the changes in lighting technology, it ends up being kind of every color channel. It used to be especially red, but now the change in the lighting technology is now changing dramatically. Used to be tungsten lights, and the tungsten lights the tungsten light itself is a light bulb, so it's a warm light. It's a warm component, and then they put gels on that. So let's put a green gel on it, and then what that does is it filters out most of the components apart from the green. But of course, it's a warmish green because there's a lot of warm hitting the filter in the first place, and then that green gel will not filter out everything. Same with blues. There's a warmish blue, so you ended up having lots of warmish type of colors there with the tungsten lights. And now it's LEDs, and they do not have that tungsten warmth, so they are much more on the primary color side. And that is kind of harsh on the color channels, because now the blue color channel gets a lot of more work to do, and the green color channel gets a lot of more work to do, and the red color channel, of course, too. And then you have like magenta. I don't like magenta from LEDs because that's even harsher. So learn to kind of tame the color channels, and then I think you're on the safe side. And by the way, if it's a bigger show, like a real big traveling show or something, and you are really, really serious about this and want it perfect, no run and gun kind of photography, but really planned out photo shoot, you know, in some of those shows, lights are actually planned up front and tested. There's this lighting person, and they will do a proper light show. And that means they have planned it out, because there is a progression in the songs, in the playlist, in the song list, and the different songs will get different light shows and different moods, and the light guy will save those to their light mixer and then recall them during the show. So if you at all have the chance to attend those rehearsals, you could pretty much take notes of the light situations. You could test out settings there and then be really, really well prepared and ready when the show is live. And by the way, speaking of attending a rehearsal, shots taken during the rehearsals, they look very much like the shots taken during the show. So in these cases, I'm usually not afraid to mix and match those. All right, this is Tips from the Top Floor. You're listening to the show about all things photography, coming to you from the Viewfinder Villa near Hanover. And thanks for being here. And thanks also for the feedback about this little change in the show, in the show's structure. I like to have like a piece of content right in the beginning before I start talking about some other things, and I'm really glad that you guys appreciate that too. Thank you so much for letting me know. That's very, very valuable and good feedback, because I want to make this show so that I want to make the show so I like it, because if I don't like it, I wouldn't make it. But your opinion is really, really important here. I'm still recovering from a cold. This is amazing. I have been pretty much without any colds for almost 2 years. And this winter, I had feels like 3 in a row, end to end. And I'm just recovering from like a third one now, which is, but everyone has something. This is the weirdest year ever. And I sure hope that this is going to be over pretty soon, because I hate it. I really hate it. Let's see what else. This is interesting. Last weekend I got to hold a workshop on perception in photography. It's very similar to the one I did last year, where I teamed up with Alexander Waschkau, a podcaster here from Germany. He does the Hoaxilla podcast, and he's also a psychologist by training and a good friend. And we thought that this might be a good idea to kind of look behind what photography is from a psychological point of view. And this has turned out to be so interesting. I mean, I learned a ton and he learned a ton. And every time we hold this thing, everyone learns a ton, including, of course, the participants. And this time we were hired by a company that does 3D visualizations. They do architecture. They work for architects and for companies that build houses, and they visualize their plans so that clients can determine if they want to buy a house or not, or stuff like that. They do a lot of other stuff too, but that's kind of one of their areas of expertise, and it's a very visual field, of course. It's kind of photography. It's very much photography, just in an artificial form. That's the culmination of computational photography, isn't it? They end up doing very realistic renderings of things. I mean, it's not just houses. They have they're embedded. They're like photos. They look like photos. They have the surroundings. They have streets and lawns and trees and sometimes even people and things. But the thing is, you can place that virtual camera pretty much anywhere you like. So you have this model in your computer, and Just imagine as a photographer, you could move anywhere you like to shoot something. I mean, we have a bit of that with the drones, the quadrocopters and things. But, you know, you can move in through another building. You can just remove another building or sit in a tree or fly over it or under it. Or as a photographer, we're always kind of gravity is a big problem because we can't fly and we can move around. But then the question is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it really helpful? Because you end up not having to make a choice, and that can be really, really difficult. And of course, it also depends on what you want to use those pictures for. I mean, in this case, they make those rendered images for companies that use them for to advertise their houses. They want to sell stuff. So they will typically interface with clients who know everything about building houses, but who don't know about composition, who don't know about what makes a great picture, who don't know about what kind of photography will help them sell their houses. And that was an interesting kind of dynamic there, because as a result, they have really strange demands. The clients of our client, right? They have strange demands. Like they want pictures that show everything, that show as much as possible. It has to have everything in this one picture. Pictures that cram in as many details as possible. Actual contrasts that might like obscure something are kind of taboo. And if it's not bright enough on one side of the building, then they want to add in a second sun so everything is lit well, right? Because it doesn't have to be realistic or appealing. It just has to show everything. You know, but we as photographers, I was shocked, you know. As a photographer, I know that doesn't necessarily further emotion in pictures. The stuff that sells something is not usually the list of features, it's the emotion. And, you know, showing everything in a picture also does not leave any room for interpretation. Like the viewer sees everything, they don't have any questions left. And that room for interpretation, that is where the storytelling happens. And that's where the viewer will start to think or have to think. That's what often pulls you into a picture. You know, and I think it must be frustrating if your client has no clue. Have you ever done something like web design and you had clients who were just who didn't know or who thought they knew better? You know, we're so conditioned to expect some level of shallow depth of field, some out of focus areas in a photo, that as soon as you don't have them, it starts looking artificial. Even if you could kind of reproduce it with the lens, it starts looking artificial, and that lack of reality can really be a problem. So sometimes just imagine you do that, you take a photo and the client goes, yeah, but why is it going out of focus to the back? And you try to explain that it's a tough thing. So as a photographer, that might be quite painful. And this is also what could differentiate them from others. Pictures that have a different look, a different look from what the competition does, that might actually help them stick out and may help them to be seen more. So that was a hugely interesting event, and we're actually now working on making that into kind of a series of things. And maybe there will be businesses that are interested in that, because that's more business targeted. But I'm also thinking of opening this up again for like everyone, and still planning. Let me know what you think. Does that sound interesting to you? Does that make sense to you? The psychology of photography, the perception. What does our brain work like? This also, by the way, we also talked about the dress, of course, which I still find really, really interesting. So that's also part of perception. Why do we sometimes perceive things in a way that doesn't help us? And how can we change that perception? How can we make people perceive things in a different way? Anyway, what else is going on? Oh yeah, Viewfinder Villa housewarming party. October is something different. March 28th. That's just a short time from now, but I think we have like over 20 people coming now. Viewfindervilla.com has all, if you're in Germany, anywhere near. If it's too far, you can stay there. There's a pretty reasonable accommodation available within minutes of driving distance here. So reasonably priced, including breakfast. I think $45 or something. This is a cheap part of Germany here, which is cool because it really will make it possible for people to come and not really have to think about, oh, I have to add another $150 and stuff like that. So viewfindervilla.com. I also just created, without even thinking about doing that, that was not the intention, but I also just created a piece of content for Tips from the Top Floor in an interview that I did for another show, Alan Attridge, the Two Hosers photography show. Great podcast. You have to listen to it. And he asked me if I wanted to talk about the rule of thirds. And yes, I know lots of people will now roll their eyes. Not the rule of thirds again. And I thought, if we talk about the rule of thirds, let's do it right. Let's do it proper. So I prepared. I sat down and I looked at pictures and I wrote something. I wrote like a whole list of bullet points and things. And then he interviewed me for his show. But I found it so interesting because we got to talk about so many interesting things around the rule of thirds. And that I asked him if I could have that piece of audio for one of the next episodes of Tips from the Top Floor. So there's like a half-hour interview, but it's really, really interesting because there's so many angles that you can actually look at the rule of thirds from that are different from what you thought. I mean, for example, one of the things that the rule of thirds is something that doesn't play an actual role in my photography anymore because it's rarely something that it's rarely a starting point. Like, I don't think I want to take this picture and I want to make it by the rule of thirds. It usually ends up being a result of composition decisions, but I never really think about doing the rule of thirds. It's you got to listen to it. I'll put it here on the show in one of the next episodes. What else? Oh yes. Oh. The last 2 weeks have been super productive in terms of preparing things. And one of them is that, and I did tell you about this before, New York City, the Real New York Inside Out workshop, where I'm teaming up with Princeton Photo Workshop. This is a workshop in October. And I mean, it's New York has so much to offer. Street stuff, street photography. I think New York is one of the best places in the world for street photography, classical street photography. Amazing cityscapes, amazing buildings, great neighborhoods. And we'll even get something that you don't get every day, and we get tripod permits for Grand Central Station, which will lead us to some good HDR opportunities. And I'm really looking forward to that. So that's in October. And I kind of thought coming to the United States just for one workshop is not enough. So I just added a second workshop. I'm doing a little coast-to-coast tour. I will be in San Diego in October too. And I just added that, teaming up with Sonny Portasio. And San Diego, I've held a workshop there, I think was 2008. Correct me if I'm wrong. It must have been 2008-ish or 2007 maybe. Maybe 2007. One of those years. So it's quite a few years ago. And I'm so looking forward to coming back because San Diego is super photogenic. It's really great for photography, especially in early October. The light will be beautiful. It has it all from old world Spanish architecture to palm trees and ocean cliffs, urban skylines, water, land, cliffs. It's just night photography, blue hour photography. So I'm really happy to come back in October. So that's all over at discoverthetopfloor.com. I'm just about to open up the registration for that. And then last but not least, okay, this I'm super stoked about. Ethiopia 2016. We finally have a date. It's in January 2016. We finally have the itinerary nailed down. So it'll be a 2-part tour, and there's a base tour that includes lots of things, Harar and Dirdawa and the Ertaale, the live volcano. So that's very cool. And then the extension is to Lalibela, which is an amazing place in Ethiopia. I mean, just the people, the architecture, the history is just mind-blowing. And we're going to be there during an even more mind-blowing event, and that is the Timkat Festival, which is like a really colorful, beautiful, amazing festival there. And so the itinerary is decided on. The website is done. The pictures are done. The pricing is done. Everything is set. We're also just about to open that for registration. And it's one that you want to register for as early as possible. First of all, limited participation, and second, the Timkat Festival kind of, I'd say if you book, and we'll write it down, there will be kind of a cutoff date, not a cutoff date for booking, but a cutoff date for which we can guarantee you the domestic flights, because those will fill up fairly quickly. So, and there's like a domestic flight included in the whole thing. I mean, you will see when you go to the website. And again, that's all over at discoverthetopfloor.com. New York City, San Diego, Ethiopia, Donegal, the Ireland workshop is still up there. So it's all kind of coming together, and I'm really happy that we have some progress there. Actually, some visible progress. You don't see the things that go on behind the scenes, but finally being able to put everything out and making it visible to the world. And I'm so glad. So discoverthetopfloor.com, that's where you go to see more about this.
Down on that instrument.
People, there is music in your head. There's music playing in your head. So listen to every word I said. There's music playing in your head. Pay attention.
Did I mention how much I like hearing your voices? It really kind of gives a face to this, to the many people out there who listen to this show, and it makes it so much more fun for me to make this show. And it doesn't even matter if it's a question, or if you came across a funny story, or if you have some feedback for the show, if you see something that is visually, photographically interesting or happens to you. And it's super easy. There's no big deal to get your voice here on the show. Go to tfttf.com, click on the orange tab, or tap on it. It works on mobile phones as well. And then just record something there, and that don't be worried. It's not like an answering machine where it goes beep and then everything is set in stone. No, you get to listen back to your own voice. You get to decide if you like it or not, and you get to re-record. And if it doesn't work, then just don't send it. But it's really cool, a cool system. It works really nice. It sounds good, and it's the best way to get something here on the show. Or just pick up the phone. I mean, if that makes you feel more comfortable, go to your phone, pick it up, dial 206-202 DSLR in the United States. That's 206-202-3757. Or internationally, dial +44 7005 805 742. I want to hear from you. Let me take a minute to thank Squarespace, this week's sponsor. You know, I remember the time when I still did web design. That's like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. And I specifically remember that one client was very specific about how things had to look, what font to use, what sizes, what colors, and I didn't fully agree with all the decisions. But in the end, of course, the client won because they were paying the check. But it was a bit of a fight. And especially in a creative field, there is not that one truth. And as a client, you might have specific ideas how to implement something, how to place things on a web page, what colors and fonts to use, Guess what? With Squarespace, you won't have to fight over things with your web designer because you get to set things up yourself within minutes. It is simple, it's powerful, and it's beautiful. I have yet to see an ugly website come out of Squarespace, to be honest. They have 24/7 live chat and email support, so if you have questions, they will help you. Even though it's so simple, I don't really expect anyone to have questions. Very self-explaining. It's only $8 a month, and you get a free domain if you buy Squarespace for a year. And all Squarespace websites are responsive, which is geek speak for they will look great on any device. They just adapt big retina screens or a tablet or a smartphone. It just looks good. And every Squarespace website comes with a free online store, which is really amazing. You can use it to sell stuff like your photos, for example, or your photo sessions, your services. You might have a studio, or you might have an ebook, or you actually, if you sign up for my October, the New York City workshop, tfttf.com/NYC 2015, that is a Squarespace shop. So start a trial with no credit card required and start building your website today. And then when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TOPFLOOR, that's one word, TOPFLOOR, to get 10% off your first purchase. And of course, to show your support for Tips from the Top Floor. I thank Squarespace for their support of Tips from the Top Floor. Squarespace, build it beautiful.
Down on that instrument.
Hey Chris, what's up? This is Dennis from Florida calling in, or booing in, I guess. Anyway, I am new to photography, new listener. I love your show, by the way. And I have a gear question for you. Hopefully it won't bore you to death. Anyway, I currently have a Nikon D5100, and it is, I think I've outgrown the camera a bit over the last 6 months or so. I seem to be digging through the menu a lot. It's getting a little frustrating. I wish I had more knobs and such on it. I wish I had maybe a second screen like I do on an old Nikon film camera. That's what's made me decide that I need more controls. I like all the controls on that thing. Anyway, I am honestly, I'm not too invested yet into photography. I've only got a couple lenses, and I'm very open-minded. I've been checking out the Canons, I guess. I picked up a couple. The things I like about the Canons are the menu system is lovely. I love that on the Canon. And I especially like the wheel rotating button on the back of it, some of them. And I also seem to like the images on the Canons a little bit more. I don't know if it's just preference. They seem a bit cooler, white balance, and the colors are a little more vibrant. I don't know, I just like maybe that's just nitpicking. The Nikons do have sharper images, it looks like, from what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm overanalyzing everything, I don't know. But I'm definitely willing to try. I think I should try both systems out before I fully invest into photography. And, well, let me just tell you the cameras I've been looking at so far. I've been looking at a D90, Nikon D90. I'm not on a budget, but I'm definitely a cheapskate, and $250, $300 US for a used D90 is a great bargain. I wish I had known about that camera before. I probably would have started with something like that. Anyway, I've also looked at the D7000. Seems like a great deal. Maybe I should wait for the 7200. The newer menus on the Nikon seem a little bit better. Plus, it'll have Wi-Fi, which is kind of cool. Let's see. I don't know. I just want to hear your thoughts about switching, or which Nikon would be a better upgrade. Or, maybe I should just save my money and not get any of the cameras and get a full frame camera when I, save up my money and get one of those maybe in a year or so. Anyway, just want to know your thoughts. Again, I love your show, and I can't wait to hear your reply. Take care.
Hey, Dennis. Okay, this is a question that I get over and over and over again, and it's yes, I will answer. I'm still answering this question. I do not actually roll my eyes on it because I think back to the time when I started with photography, and it's the same questions I had, and it's really difficult to find answers. And to be honest, it's almost impossible to give you like answers pointing you to this and take that camera. Even if I did tell you a camera that might make you feel better, but it doesn't say anything about how you and the camera kind of click, how you and the camera get along. So the question, how to choose a camera? Let me try to make this a bit more general. Well, there's a lot of criteria, and you named a few. You said the colors look a bit cooler on the Canon, and they don't look as cool on the Nikon. First of all, I do not judge that on the display of the camera, because the camera displays are their own beasts. They are their own weird kind of things, and they are not going to be truthful to you. They will always lie to you. So try to judge on your computer. Well, that is also not always truthful, or on a printout, but that's the fairer assessment than on the display of the camera, usually. Also, the colors are kind of dependent on what picture style you set up, because if you shoot in a vivid picture style, Nikon, there's one that's called Vivid, you get more crisp colors and it looks more sharp and punchy on the display of the camera. That's because the camera will build a JPEG that you get displayed on the back of the camera. And then let's say on Canon, there's a picture style called landscape, or one portrait, or standard, and they all have different treatments of the image, and they will all yield a different type of color and contrast display on the display of the camera. If you shoot JPEG, that's what you also get out of the camera. If you shoot RAW, that's a completely different thing. So if you shoot RAW, you would still get that JPEG preview in the camera, but the RAW file is something that you will then work on your computer in iPhoto, Lightroom, Aperture, not so much anymore, because that's not going to be around for much longer. But yeah, there's lots of software to do that with. So do not judge on the display of your camera. That's kind of the short hand for this. The same is true for sharpness. You said that some of the Nikons seem to be more sharp. Now again, are those JPEGs from the camera? Because there is in-camera sharpening, and different image styles will apply a different amount of sharpening. And then, you know what in the end is most responsible for the sharpness is the lens, not necessarily the camera. And then there are super sharp Canon lenses, and then there are not so sharp Canon lenses. And the same is true for Nikon. There are super sharp Nikon lenses, and there are not so sharp Nikon lenses. And some lenses are very soft when shot wide open. Like you have a 51.8, and you shoot it wide open. Yeah, there is a bit of softness, pretty much. That's what those lenses do. And then you stop it down to 2.8, and all of a sudden it's super, super sharp. So lenses are kind of moving targets. And that's true for both sides, Nikon or Canon. And then, some type of pictures can benefit from some softness. Like if you take portraits, that might be helpful. Or some pictures work better when tack sharp, like some landscape photos, for example. So these criteria are all moving targets, and it kind of depends on what you shoot and how you shoot it. Now, I understand you are at a point in your photography where you're actually not having these thoughts, but I just wanted to let you know that those are there, and it might take a while for you to wrap your head around all of that. And in the beginning, I really wouldn't worry too much about this. It might take years to find out what works for you and what doesn't, and what gear will be your friend and which one will be in your way when you shoot. I just remember a few years ago on one of the workshops, a participant was pretty new to photography, but had a lot of disposable income. So that person bought the best gear possible. They went to a shop and just asked the salesperson, and the salesperson, that's kind of salespeople like, because that person ended up buying a really expensive camera, a professional level camera, and lots of professional level gear. But in the end, that resulted in a lot of confusion because the camera ended up having too many options, too many buttons. And then the tripod that person bought had like 6 different knobs to set up, different angles and things and stuff, instead of like 2. It was a ball head with 6 different knobs to set up. That ended up being in the way. It did not benefit the photography of that workshop participant. And it broke my heart to see that because someone might have a good eye, someone might have a good gut feel about how to compose a photo, and then you end up being hampered by the technology because it's too good. I also actually at this point would not think, if I were you, I wouldn't think about full frame or crop, especially if you haven't done any SLR photography before. Now, I come from full frame analog SLR photography, so that's kind of where I feel at home because I've done it for so many years. But if you grow up on a crop camera, an APS-C sensor, 1.5 or 1.6 crop, hey, perfectly fine, absolutely fine, nothing, no problems there. So here's my suggestion: take those cameras home over the weekend. Yes, you probably can't do this if you want to order online, but there are local dealers and they are still there and they have cameras on display in the store, and if they have a chance to make a sale, if that increases their chances of making a sale, go talk to them. Can I take this Nikon and this Canon home over the weekend and play with them? And I'll leave a deposit here, or you might even know them. So that is often an option. And that will help you make the decision. Or your friends might have the cameras that you're looking at. So play with the cameras. Take your time with them. Evaluate the pictures on your computer. But especially, very, very important, listen to your gut. Listen to check out the haptics. How does the camera feel? Does it feel good? Does the concept of the camera click with you? Or is it alien? I know that Nikons and Canons are very different when it comes to handling. And it doesn't just start at like... the direction you put the lens in on a Nikon, you turn it to the left. On Canon, you turn it to the right. Same with some of the buttons; they are just the opposite direction on Nikons, and that is kind of difficult to wrap your head around. But so listen to your gut. How does the camera feel? I think that is way more important than any of the hard facts and features. And that was it for today. Thank you so much for listening. And well, let's see. What did we have? Oh yeah. So the workshops again: Ethiopia and New York City and San Diego coast to coast tour in the United States in October. DiscoverTheTopFloor.com. That's where you find everything about those workshops. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention one other one is in Berlin, in Germany, on the 8th of August for the German audience, for the German listeners. It's the Vrindfototag. Yep, that's how you pronounce it. And it'll be in the Beta House in Berlin. And if you go to tfttf.com/Vrindfototag, trust me, I'll put a link in the show notes. And that's it's started to sell out, but we have it's like a 40 people event. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be a ton of fun there. So you find the links and everything at tfttf.com/674. Again, that's tfttf.com/674. Okie dokie. And yet again, it's time for the thought of the day, the quote of the day. Again, we're still reading from CJ Chilvers' book. Actually, he tweeted to me a few days ago that, let me quote him, "I'm currently getting twice the traffic from your site versus Craft and Vision. The loyalty of your followers is awesome." Did you hear that? You guys make me proud. So thank you for that. Okay, today's chapter is how to read about photography. Carpenters who work every day with their craft don't get magazines about hammers. Marco Arment. In deciding which photo blogs, books, and magazines are worth your valuable time, it helps to remember our obsession is not cameras, it's photography. This eliminates roughly 99% of the filler out there. Here are a few simple rules worth considering when reading about photography. Most books could be a blog post or two, and most blog posts could be a sentence or two. Recognize those who don't respect your time. There is courage in brevity. Know your teacher. Consider who you're giving your time and attention to and whether you're learning anything of value. If you wouldn't consider your blogger much of a teacher, move along. If you don't find a suitable replacement, you'll regain precious time and maybe learn a thing or two on your own. Always favor personal blogs to groups or companies. Individuals have more incentive to be honest and don't have a quota to fill. That filler comes at the expense of your time, attention, and possibly money. I personally prefer bloggers who have better things to do than blog. I know that when they do right, it'll be for a good reason. Consider the ad-to-content ratio on blogs and in magazines. With more advertisers to please, the amount of honest writing shrinks. If everything is great, anything can be sold. Cameras will always improve. Will you? Accept that the advance of technology will not necessarily make you a better photographer, and 99% of the content in photography blogs becomes irrelevant. I love this stuff. It's really, really a well-written form of what I think about when I think about photography so often, especially about teaching and stuff. Yeah, see, and CJ Chilvers told you that you have to trust me more than others because I'm an individual. I'm myself. So I do have all the incentive to be truthful. Ha! Ha! I love it. Anyway, thank you so much for being subscribed. If you're not subscribed, by the way, now is the time. It's super simple. I have this new subscribe button. If you go to tfttf.com in the sidebar on your device, on your computer, there's a big green button that says subscribe, and this is just super simple now and really easy to regularly get this show automatically to your computer or your device or whatever you want to use to listen to the podcast. Anyway, music for the show by Jeff Smith, by Josh Woodward, the Native.Newton, and Hans-Peter Kagerud. Publishing of the show is done by Release Speaks and Matt Refsitar Armstead. My name is Chris Marquardt. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Marquardt. That's Chris Marquardt. Leave a review on iTunes. Recommend the show to others. Go to tfttf.com/674 to find out more about all the things I talked about. Until next time, go out and take great photos and happy shooting.